So welcome and thank you for joining us at our Serials Committee event this morning. So we've got three presentations for you this morning. And before we kick off with those, I'd just like to talk really briefly about who ARLIS is, if you are not aware. So we're an inclusive organisation that exists to support those working in and with art libraries. We do this in various ways, including with events like this one and the annual conference, and also through our Art Libraries journal. There are individual and institutional membership options and various membership perks. One of which is the opportunity to get involved, which I would really recommend to anyone who is interested. I've been on the Serials Committee for several years, but also previously part of the conference working party, and it's a really rewarding and fun thing to be a part of. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone. So this is our agenda for this morning. So first we're hearing from my committee colleague Ben. Then after that we'll hear from Joe, and Miglena will speak third, and then we'll have questions in between each session. So do make a note of any questions that you think of during the presentations. Hopefully we'll get a chance to get to the questions that we have. But we are fairly tight on time because we're trying to do this just in the hour. So if there are any questions that we don't have time for, or if you think of later, then please do feel free to get back in touch with us and we can answer those for you. So I'm going to pass over to Ben now. So I'm going to stop sharing, and yeah, Ben can start sharing, I think.
Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes on topic of serials in space, further reflections on 3 years of auditing a museum library. So a year ago, I did a similar talk in this same event. And so this has been really interesting and useful to kind of think about what we've managed to do over the past year, and sort of looking to the future as well. So I'm going to just give a brief overview of the library at the Natural History Museum, and then the kind of two collections management projects that I've been involved in, continue to be involved in. Then I'm going to kind of unpack a couple of aspects of those projects, focusing on serials, obviously. So initially going to talk about duplication, deaccessioning and disposals. And then secondly, going to talk about the perennial issue of monographs in series and serialization. And then I'll sort of kind of briefly point to some other areas that are coming up or we're thinking about. So the NHM library is the Library of the Natural History Museum, and it comprises of approximately 23,000 meters of material held across 3 sites and in an off-site storage. And crucially, for some of the work that I'll come to discuss, is in 42 separate rooms across all of those places. So it's quite distributed. So the subjects include the sort of key areas of natural history, so botany, zoology, paleontology, mineralogy, entomology, and ornithology. We have material such as obviously the classic things you might have in a library, but we also have a large kind of artwork collection related to those subjects as well. So the main users are museum staff, they're predominant users, but then we also have we also open to the public 3 days a week, and we have a reading room in which kind of anyone can come and request material to use for their research. So the library is arranged along the lines of those key subject areas, which I mentioned. And historically, it was managed by quite separate teams. And it's only in the relative recent past, relative to the history of the museum, that it's been brought together. But we're still sort of living in the world in which we've inherited of that division. So it's a collection that's been divided by subject, divided in space, in kind of like across the country, but then also even within the building, divided into lots of separate rooms. The serials collections are similarly divided. So there's 7 large serial collections, which is consisting of over 5,000 meters of material, approximately 30,000 titles, and yeah, we get in about that many new print issues each month. So NHM Unlocked is a project to move a lot of this material to a new science and digitalization centre that we're opening in Reading. So one of the projects that I've been involved in has been preparing the material for this move. So we're moving about 5,500 meters of library material alongside 28 million specimens. So it's a lot of stuff. And across the whole project, there's been 45 members of staff recruited, with 8 members of library staff. We're down at the moment to 5, I think, full-time equivalent. And that's because the project was front-loaded. So we're kind of going to be losing staff over the next few years until the end. But yeah, we've managed to prepare of the material that needs to move. We've managed to prepare about 75%, I think, now. And so this includes serials, books, maps. So this is all a huge kind of auditing and barcoding project. And then another kind of large project that this one is just starting, just started last year, is a collection storage project. So this is something that is kind of at the level of the library and is about collections right sizing, and kind of thinking about how and where we store all of our collections. So it kind of runs alongside and kind of overlaps with the Unlock project. And the ultimate aim for the kind of long-term vision of the library collection is that it will be much more of a unified collection over multiple sites, as opposed to the way in which it currently is considered, which is sort of like lots of kind of separate collections, which kind of are managed by the same people, if that makes sense. So there's going to be lots of parts to this collection storage project. So I've listed a few here. So it's going to be like reviewing the collections, assessing the collections against the Leeds criteria, which I'll come on to discuss, transferring material into special collections, transferring relevant journals to UKRR, and then also deaccessioning, partly via deduplication and partly via the Leeds criteria. So again, a very big project. It's as I said, this has only just started, and I'm kind of one of a number of library staff, internal library staff, who are working on this. So as I said, there's lots of aspects to this, but I'm going to just talk about 2. So firstly, how we're going about thinking about deduplication. So it's possibly like, I doubt it's unique to us, but we have, because of the history of the library and the way in which it was set up, we do have quite a large number of duplicates. Because the collections were kind of managed separately, there was a need possibly to have different copies of the same material in different buildings or in different parts of the site, or being used by different teams. And when we initially started the Unlock project a few years ago, deduplication wasn't really part of our brief, but it's become increasingly a significant thing that we're thinking about. And for the new collections storage project, it's kind of front and center in terms of trying to right size the collection, and the idea that we kind of keep effectively one copy of each title is kind of one of the core principles of that project. So this process then involves defining duplicate. How you define a duplicate may seem quite straightforward, but there's a number of kind of things in which we're thinking about what a kind of true duplicate is. So that's thinking about the uniqueness of the physical copy, the whether or not it has things like kind of signatures, annotations that make it potentially unique, whether or not for older material, which is certainly something that, again, it comes up at the museum a lot, that it has plates, whether these are coloured or not. This is for serial, this is actually something that's very common in serials, where 19th century kind of natural history serials would have lots of plates in them. We're also thinking about kind of the relative quality, like condition of the material. If there's multiple copies, but one of them is in terrible condition, then we may decide to keep another copy for access. So it's not simple as like, do we have two copies? If so, get rid of one. It's like it requires kind of copy to copy comparison. So to sort of like create the lists and devise a process, we've utilized the analytics module of ALMA to kind of come up with reports of kind of initially titles with multiple holdings effectively. These reports can then be turned into sort of slips using kind of mail merge. So we kind of managed to then kind of get from the catalogue to physical slips that list all the copies with bits of information, which can then be shelf checked and compared, and then notes can be added to records, which mean that like when further deduplication can be done, it's not necessary that each copy is shelf checked at that point. So the Leeds criteria is part of this, and that it's kind of divided into 4 possible kind of attendant sort of collection types. So there's heritage, legacy, self-renewing, and finite. This is something that we've just started to consider. So if anyone's interested in this, I can talk about it more in the Q&A, but I'll sort of just brush over it for now, as it's not something we've actually started implementing, but it will be something that will be very important for the kind of collection of the museum going forward. So once we've identified things for deaccessioning, then we've also started to utilize other kind of technological solutions to try and speed up this process, because again, we're working on a huge scale. So the first thing we've done is to try and utilize the fact that via Alma you can access Alma via an API. So we've kind of devised processes of being able to use Excel spreadsheets to interact with Alma to speed up deaccessioning. And then again, with this type of scale of work, we need to have kind of very clear systems of trying to keep track of everything once it's kind of been identified for disposal. So again, we're using Alma to manage that, but also there's a lot of thinking about how to manage that in space as well. So that was briefly talking about that. And then I'll briefly now talk about kind of monographs in series as part of this work. So another aspect of this work is that we've decided to move our monographic series that traditionally would have been held in serial locations out of the serial locations and into the book collections. So this kind of brings up a lot of issues around how we've traditionally catalogued this material, whether or not we kind of treated it analytically, i.e. made records for every part, or we've kept our cataloguing to just a series level. It's part of a general trend maybe in which libraries have kind of moved away from focusing on the seriesness of a series, if that makes sense, and focus more on the monographic nature of them. So I think it kind of does fit within a broader trend. But as I said, there's lots of local issues around how we've kind of accessioned, ordered and received this type of material. So it's like a very challenging project to try and disambiguate all the monographic parts and monographic series records, to try and then think about how we can firstly identify them, but then secondly move them from the series locations into into monographs. So once they've been identified, then there's further questions about whether or not the material should be repress marked, or if it can still be held together but in a monographic location. Then it's also thinking about finding space to accommodate this. This is like a huge move within another loads of other moves. So it's it's quite challenging. And then we can also think about its relationship to the other work I mentioned before, like the deduplication and the Leeds criteria. So that is those are a couple of aspects of this work, but just some other things kind of like that we're thinking about going forward as well is whether or not these processes are done all at once or if they're done kind of in isolation. We're also thinking about special serials and is it, how can you remove special serial like pre-1850 serials from a run while still trying to keep the integrity of that run or that collection. We're thinking about kind of external resources like the UK Research Reserve and the UK Printed Book Collection. And then we're also thinking about what e-access means in terms of perpetualness, kind of if we have access for something now, does that mean we can make decisions about disposals or deaccessioning if we cannot be assured that we will have access to that in the future? So this is a very, very whistle-stop tour of all of this, but hopefully if any of these aspects or any of this stuff is interesting, we can talk about it briefly in the Q&A. So thanks.
Cool. So I'm going to be talking about RES Serials and Wikimedia today. I have a very long job title, and essentially what I do with RES Serials is I lead teaching and engagement with special collections here at UCL. I'm mostly focused on our fairly new, shiny East London campus, but I also do bits of work at Bloomsbury. And what's quite good about this is a lot of the courses at UCL East are brand new, so we can kind of get students involved with looking at our collections in lots of different ways, which is really, really great. We can try out things that we haven't been able to do at Bloomsbury, and we can kind of push new approaches and get them to think about things. And the small press collections here at UCL have kind of accidentally been really, really centered to that, because a lot of the courses that UCL are leading on are kind of they're often quite modern and they're quite forward thinking, and a lot of the issues that are coming up in small press publications keep coming up there. Because this role was brand new, one of the things that I also do, I've kind of accidentally fallen into it, is I co-lead on department strategy and delivery of Wikimedia stuff, because it's something we're really interested in. And that's kind of a secondary part of my job, but it's something that overlaps quite nicely, and I'm constantly playing about with things. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you about some of the projects that we've run so far, learned, and see if any of this might be useful to you. Still being annoying. So first of all, why Wikimedia? I got into kind of thinking about Wikimedia in a previous role, and I've really developed it here at UCL. But essentially, you've probably heard of Wikipedia. Most people have. We all use it for lots of different things. But there are a huge range of other projects that the Wikimedia Foundation, which is a charity, kind of helped to run. There's many, many wormholes for you to go down if you want. They have things like, they have wiki travel guides, they have wiki news, they have quote things, but the main ones that we're really using are Wikipedia, which is English language, which is encyclopedia in lots of different languages, but we use the English one. We also do a lot of work with Wikidata, which underpins the kind of the data that's held within Wikipedia. And we also are playing about with Wikimedia Commons, which is basically open source images that anyone can use and share. The really good thing about this is that it kind of aligns with a lot of what UCL wants to do in terms of making knowledge accessible. And wiki projects are a great way to reach global audiences. I think the current stat is that English Wikipedia is about 48% of the entire traffic that Wikipedia generally runs on. So it's a really, really big platform. So if you get collections and their serials on there, they have a kind of instant outreach that doesn't involve people finding your catalogs through Google or your own institutional website. So it's a really nice kind of addition to that. What have we done so far? Lots and lots of little experiments, basically. In 2023, the MA Public History students, who were the first cohort, created a Wikipedia page for 0 to 9 magazine, which is an artist publication that was running in the 60s. What they did was they went through the original material that's held here at UCL, and they listed the contributors for each issue and put that information along with some contextual things on that wiki page. What was really, really good about that was that 0 to 9 had a lot of different contributors throughout the years. It had several issues, and lots of artists were involved. And one of the things that Wikipedia really, really likes is when pages link to other pages, so topics aren't just running in isolation. And the rare serials are often a really good example of that because there's lots and lots of collaborators to them. So they sit really nicely in the network. And it was a great kind of exercise at looking at the original material that we had to make a kind of general information page about this publication, which was great. More recently, by two things that I was working on last year is that we got some central funding through the AHRC and UCL Knowledge Exchange to explore how Wikidata can enhance access to our college periodicals. So basically, these are kind of all the journals and things that students made throughout UCL's time. Obviously, lots of different contributors to there, lots of really great insights into student life. And that project really explored how we can use Wikidata to upload text and kind of create individual entries for each periodical. We were focusing on Pi, which is one of the main student ones, and then seeing how then once you put that information into Wikipedia, it can be used for other things. The other recent project we have, I do a project with public history students each year, is last year we had a group looking at African small press publications. And what they did was they were playing about with Wikidata to create a kind of visual map of the networks between small press publications and creators, because there was quite a lot of overlap, as you'd imagine. And they were using Wikidata to actually show these connections in a really visual way. So it's kind of three separate projects, but all kind of doing really interesting things. The challenges of this work, I thought I'd go challenges then impact, is the initial time to kind of get people up to speed on Wiki and how that does. I do a lot of Wikimedia training, and I'm always really happy to do it if anyone wants to reach out to me. The initial learning time can be quite high. Obviously, getting people up to speed with how to edit Wikipedia, how to edit Wikidata there's quite a long lead-in time, so that slightly limits how big the projects can be. I did a lot of work on the 0 to 9 page after my students finished that project, because the initial feedback was that it didn't have enough references in. So I went full on librarian and was like, I will find many references. Obviously, when it comes to rare serials and contemporary material, is the copyright issue basically limits slightly what we can do. We've largely been playing it really safe so far. So the college periodicals, obviously they are made by students at UCL, so UCL owns the copyright. But it limits slightly what we can do with open knowledge in that way, particularly in terms of putting copy-specific information online or putting full items online because of those issues. The other challenge that I'm kind of finding is my ever kind of lasting goal really is to build up a community of people here at UCL who want to do wiki work and want to edit. And building a community around this takes a long time. Students have a lot of things going on. We're often around more than students are. And it just takes quite a lot of effort to kind of build up that momentum. There's also kind of leading in from that is balancing these projects with student deadlines limits how far we can do it. We have to make it quite scalable within the time that they have. And even if they have like a whole term to work on something, they're doing like 4 or 5 other things. So we have the kind of scale of what we can do is sometimes a bit limited through that. But the impact of things, I don't actually have any stats to hand on how on the kind of numbers side of it, but it's kind of created greater visibility of UCL's collections, but also these serials more generally on platforms, which is really good. It contributes massively to wider open knowledge, particularly Wikimedia as a charity is really, really up for doing a lot of heritage collaboration, which is great. And they're really keen to increase diverse voices and particularly like women's voices on there. So any serials that kind of speak to those things or have those voices really work with the foundation's aims, because wiki projects tend to reflect the bias in current society. So it's quite often white male focused. The other thing that I think is really good that I push on quite a lot is that it develops tech students for both students and staff. Like I am not a tech person by background, and I've learned a lot through doing these projects. And it's a really nice way of kind of developing those skills, particularly for humanities students who might not necessarily get the chance to do it in their everyday kind of work. The other thing that it does is it kind of allows us to view rare serials in different ways, because by highlighting things like the connections between artists and how the networks we're building and those communities, it puts these individual items into a much bigger kind of wider network of what's going on within the publications world. As pretty much everything we've done, they're all kind of the contributors are often overlapping, so that's really nice. The other thing I think has been quite good about it is that the projects we're doing are scalable. Sometimes it's very, very discrete things like Wikipedia page for one their serial. Sometimes it's a bit of a scoping project like the college periodicals where we were seeing what the tech could do. Um, so because of that, we're always trying out different things. There's a few Wikidata projects we're working on at the moment that's using a set of 100 items. And we also want to do some stuff with one of our other sets of rare periodicals. So that's quite nice. And it kind of allows us to balance that along with workload. But the other thing I think has been really good about it is, as I said, I tend to work a lot with humanities students, and this has really allowed us to collaborate with other departments. So the college periodicals project was done in conjunction with the information studies department, who are often looking at kind of digital humanities and data. And that's really, really good. It allows cross-department collaboration. The MA Public History is something that we do a lot of work on anyway, but again, it's kind of allowing that in new light, which is really nice. So there's a lot of impact to be had by doing smaller scale things like this. Again, that was quite a whistle-stop tour through, and I'm sorry that my tech was being a bit annoying, but I'll share these slides with anyone who wants them. I've links on here to some of the pages. If you want to look at the 0 to 9 page, it's still up. It's still doing quite well. And I put some links into the other projects as well, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
It's coming up. So yeah, I'm going to talk about budgeting for subscriptions in particular, and I jokingly called my presentation Budgeting Woes because the topic may seem a little bit too complicated or daunting or have a lot of moving parts, but in fact I find it personally very interesting. Of course, budgeting for subscription and serials can be done many different ways, and it's largely dependent on the collection size and the type of the collection, whether it's mainly printed or electronic resources that you're subscribing to, as well as the budget size. However, generally, there are two ways of budgeting that are sometimes done separately or combined together. There are centralized budgets and there are dispersed budgets. Part of the resources can be done under a central budget, whereas part of them could be also decentralized, and each of those budgeting modes has its own advantages and disadvantages. However, here I'm going to talk about my personal experience of budgeting in the University of the Arts London, where I'm subscriptions, copyright, and licensing librarian, and the budgeting we do is largely dependent on the type of the collection we have. So we have a collection spread across 6 college libraries and 2 additional sites, so 8 sites in total. And we have a running list of current subscriptions, of individual titles of current subscriptions of 800 plus, which excludes packages and online and packages of online subscriptions as well. So it is very print heavy, the collection we have, and that comes with its challenges in terms of regularity of moving parts that are part of it. We are currently using a centralized budgeting method, which means that all the college libraries and library locations are managed centrally by me, and this gives us a little bit more control and oversight of the titles spread across the sites, as well as allows us to have a bit more coherent view of the collection and avoid deduplication and wasted effort if we're doing it in a decentralized way, as well as allowing us to align more strategically the collection development to the collection development and management policy that we have, as well as other efforts such as diversifying our collections and making them more accessible. So I'm going to cover a couple of areas that you may be familiar with or may not be relevant because of the types of collections you do, but hopefully they'll be useful as triggers if you have forgotten to take into account something when you're doing your budgets. So the first and the most important thing for budget management is data keeping and having very good and coherent data across collected from various platforms. The data depends obviously on the collection, but mostly it includes subscription periods, as those could be very flexible depending on delayed publications and delivery problems that may occur. So when subscription periods change, obviously that changes the renewal point of that subscription, and it changes when expenditure will be coming out of your budget. Formats, recording formats, and product codes, depending on how you're talking about them, is also very important, as it will give you a very good base for understanding the type of collection you have, and also give you all the data you might be needing for SCONL expenditure. Renewal dates and estimated costs is something that I found very useful to record in order to be able to track commitments, because it may not be the case for you, but for us it certainly is, due to the very niche type of publication we're subscribing, that oftentimes we would renew a subscription and we will not receive an invoice the next month or the next 2 months or the next 5 months. So we often have to chase invoices. So having a firm grasp of commitments and ongoing commitments and chasing those is very useful. Obviously, tracking price increases, both as a variance in percentages and as amounts, is very useful, especially for senior management for reporting to senior managers in terms of anticipating the amount of budget you'll be needing next year. Base price is also very important for that, as it allows you to know what's the base price of your collection and how that is increasing year after year. If you have any segmentation in your budget, depending on colleges or departments, that's also useful to record in all this in one mastered spreadsheet, basically. Invoice data and refunds data allows you to keep track of actuals. So that's a key part that we often make sure that we check against our finance management system to ensure that all the expenditure recorded on the finance management system matches our own records, as well as cancellations, new titles, and package information is just always an important one to keep track of for end of year reporting. So that there's obviously a lot more data that we keep, but these are some of the key data points that are relevant for budget management that we keep. Another thing I found very early on as I started my job is that I was very keen on creating a schedule, as previously I did not inherit any documentation of any sort of how renewals are done and what's the process for that. So I have worked backwards to create a schedule of renewals. As you may be familiar, if you're using a subscription agent, they require renewals to be done 3 months prior to the end of the subscription date in order to ensure continuity of the delivery of the subscription. So working backwards from that, I set up a schedule for a review process, which previously didn't exist before I started this job. So the review process basically includes our subject librarians reviewing each of the titles on a monthly basis, prior renewals being made in order to establish if they need to do cancellations or need to check with academics whether titles are still needed. And obviously working backwards from that, we are collecting usage stats for each of our subscriptions and also monitoring delivery for each subscription in order to ensure we're not renewing subscriptions that are actually not being delivered. So that all ties in a monthly schedule. In line with that, so for example, we do the usage stats, we do the review process with the subject librarians collaboratively, and then I do the renewals every month. And we, in order to get things timed as well, we have scheduled our invoices deliveries to be done on a monthly basis rather than at any point of the month, which helps allocate tasks at different points of the month and not have to do renewals throughout the whole month, but just within the first week of the month, for example. I also do scheduled budget reviews. Those are usually done every quarter, every 3 months, in order to align my expenditure with the expenditure recorded in our finance management system and to keep track of commitments. Later on in the year, it allows you to understand whether you have any budget that's been freed for purchasing new subscriptions and how much that budget is. If your finance team is doing accruals accounting, you may be familiar with the prepayments planner, which basically breaks down every invoice over a certain amount to monthly payments, and that's how it is presented in reports for senior management. However, you obviously pay the full amount to the supplier at the same time, but your budget seems to show something different. So the prepayments planner is very important to take into account when you're estimating how much budget you have left. Another key component to budget management that I perform is I'm doing regular reviews quarterly. So monthly, I verify all the invoice data prior approving invoices on our finance system in order to ensure that our master spreadsheet is actually up to date and includes all the invoices that are processed by our finance team, because oftentimes invoices are sent straight to the finance team and oftentimes they're sent only to us. We do receive monthly transaction reports from our finance system, which contain all the expenditure for that month. So I verify to make sure that these are actually also present in our master spreadsheet. I use our master spreadsheet to track commitments. As I mentioned, we have this issue where invoices are not being issued in a timely manner, and oftentimes I have to chase them. And depending on whether you're moving to a different subscription provider or a different agent, we have caught several times that subscriptions were actually processed by the agent, but not by the publisher. So chasing those commitments and invoices has allowed us to get our collection filled up in a timely manner rather than missing out issues due to the subscription not being set up on time. I do regular reviews also on purchase requests and price them as they come on monthly basis in order to ensure that at the point of ordering, we have all the necessary information we have to place new orders, as well as reviewing pending refunds on monthly basis. At the end of the year, it's very good practice to review the types of expenditure you have, because this necessitated with us the allocation of a static fund as part of the project to cover replacement issues and binding, which was previously was kind of coming as a surprise into the budget as an expenditure. So now once that is allocated separately, it's not actually affecting in any way the renewals and purchasing of new subscriptions. There's many external factors that can affect the way that you do budget management for subscriptions, such as existing procedures or the way that the top budget is managed by the person who's managing it. There's many different tools and platforms that you can use to get data, not only to verify the data that you're holding on your master spreadsheet, but to complement the data that you already have, such as the finance management system you're using, the subscription agents platforms, JUSP. As I mentioned, the subscription agent platforms. In terms of decision making, even though the budget is centralized, decision making could be decentralized, which is in our case. So where decision making lies is very important in order to be able to manage a budget, because that necessitates additional time to actually collaborate with the people who are making decisions. Collaborative purchasing platforms are also something that collaborative purchasing is also something can affect your the way you manage your budget, such as JISC agreements, as well as LUPC frameworks, and with that also VAT fluctuations and exchange rate. So how is that all relating to collections management? Budget management, although it may seem very complex and tricky and kind of boring, it also has a direct relation to how the collection of subscriptions and journals is managed within the organization. So within UL, we have a very collaborative approach to collection management for serials, and the decision-making, as I mentioned, is distributed between subject librarians and myself. However, they're making decisions in collaboration with academics in order to ensure that the currency of the collection and also new acquisitions are prioritized in a manner that's needed for the collection, whereas I make the decisions on how those essential prioritized new purchases can fit into the remaining budget that we have. We also ensure continuity of the collection by performing claiming on bi-weekly basis for all missing journals, print journals that have not arrived. So that's a key component for ensuring that the continuity of the collection. As I mentioned, the currency and the relevance of the collection is managed through the review process, the new purchases through the liaison that our subject librarians are doing with academics and users. In terms of maintenance, the subscription budget absorbs additional costs for binding and purchases of missing issues, and as well as that, storage and disposal is also managed through that budget as well. And that is the end of my presentation.